flight. In fact, it's a power he didn't even have when he debuted in the comics in 1938. At first, the Man of Steel could only leap, 1/8 of a mile to be exact.
Up in the sky, look!
It's a bird!
It's a plane! It's Superman!
But by the 1940s, Superman had become a full-fledged frequent flyer. Which raises another question. Can gravity alone explain this phenomenal superpower?
For Superman to fly in constant level flight, he has to have a thrust force that equals his drag force, and he has to have a lift that equals his weight in order to be balanced up and down, right and left. We see no obvious propulsion means for Superman. How does he overcome the drag force? That's the mystery of his flight.
Over the years, Superman has found some different ways to get off the ground. In the 1950s television series starring George Reeves, Superman would have to gather speed before lifting himself into the air, just like a jet plane. He also bounced, taking full advantage of Earth's lesser gravity to achieve height, speed, and distance. In other incarnations, Superman could simply lift himself off the ground and fly anywhere, even at super speeds. But the difference between Earth's gravity and that of Krypton could no longer explain this remarkable ability.
This is my theory. The flying is based on the magnetic content of his body and the Earth's polarity. So he can push himself away and pull himself towards it.
Actually, magnetism might be a plausible explanation. Magnets are used in certain types of high-speed trains, where a magnet is placed on the bottom of the vehicle, and a magnet of the same polarity is placed on a track below it. The two magnets use force to propel themselves apart, lifting the vehicle off the ground. But there just might be another explanation for Superman's ability to fly, one that involves a speculative theory actually being studied by scientists here on Earth.
There are some theories that gravity is carried by subatomic particles that are called gravitons. Gravitons are something we have not yet detected. Theoretically, they would travel in waves, much like light waves or electromagnetic waves. If Superman has a way of generating gravitons within his own body, assuming that gravitons exist, I would say he would be flying by essentially riding the waves of gravity that are in his immediate environment.
Now, thinking about flying is one thing.
Here we go, and rolling.
But if you're a movie maker, how do you convince modern-day audiences that a man actually can travel through the air?
Little guy again, folks.
For the 2006 release, Superman Returns, director Bryan Singer set out to bring as much realism as possible to the movie's flying scenes, with the help of the film star Brandon Routh.
I knew flying was going to be a challenging experience, but I didn't realize how much of an athlete I was going to have to be.
A way that we experimented with how the body moves in flight is we had Brandon swimming in a pool, and he's quite a good swimmer. And he would push off from one wall of the swimming pool, but because he was swimming, he'd be suspended, and then his body would exhibit strength or resistance in certain ways. We would take video of this and then use that as a reference.
Of course, there's more to Superman than just flying over global real estate. Much more. For instance, what does it really take to be the strongest and fastest man on Earth? On Smallville, young Clark Kent, as played by Tom Welling, can handle supersonic speeds. At times, he moves so fast, he seems to be invisible.
One of the things that we have to balance is how much what he does has an impact on the world around him. For instance, if he runs at super speed, is he running supersonically? And if so, does he generate a boom? We don't really want to go there because part of what he does is get in and out of a room really quickly and pretty much silently. So we do cheat that.
God.
We actually played if you were the naked human eye in the room and he went and zipped around, you couldn't see him. Obviously on television, to see it, you see a bit of a blur. And sometimes we have what we call Clark time, which is when you see him moving and everything else in slow motion. Again, visually, to see the different sides of these superpowers.
But what kind of physiology would Superman need to have in order for his body to move at such super speeds.
For Superman to run at the great velocities that he does, he would need to have a muscular system far superior to ours and joints with less friction than our joints. If we were to move our limbs at the speeds he does, the joints would heat up and we would simply degrade the joint. Our bone tissue and articular cartilages would not be able to withstand those sorts of accelerations.
To find a reason for Superman's incredible resilience, you won't have to look up in the sky. Instead, just look under your feet at the skeletal structure of insects.
The insect has a chitinous exoskeleton, much like our fingernail, but in many instances denser. Superman would have to have virtually an exoskeleton that allows him great flexibility, but the capacity to withstand impacts.
Hello, Bates. Hello, Superman. You don't seem very surprised to see me. Well, being a wrongdoer, I figured sooner or later you gotta catch me.
Even in the 1930s, Superman comic books compared the strength of the Man of Steel to the durability of insects. But even the toughest bug can't take a bullet the way Superman can. If Superman's molecular makeup is so tough, wouldn't it be impossible for him to shave or even cut his hair?
In the 1950s, Superman comics started running letter columns. Kids asking questions like, okay, dude, how does Superman get his hair cut if he's invulnerable? And so the answer became that that he fooled all the barbers in town into believing that he was actually secretly bald, but don't tell anybody, because I don't want any other kids to make fun of me. And then he would go off into his secret cavern and he would use mirrors and heat vision to sort of give himself a quick trim.
Most people don't know that the Fortress of Solitude came with a shaving kit and all the things you'd basically find in a W hotel.
Here, cheers.
Believe it or not, Superman wasn't always so invincible. His powers have actually increased over time, as readers and audiences expected more and more from their favorite superhero.
At first, he was susceptible to poison gases, high voltages of electricity. But over the years, as you need to write more and more stories about this character, you need to have him go up against greater and greater threats and sort of up the odds.
Okay, so let's accept the fact that Superman has become virtually indestructible over the years. But that doesn't explain why his costume is, too. After all, it doesn't seem to tear, stain, or even wrinkle.
It was always destructible in the early days, but it was decided that it's kind of a drag to think about Superman having to go home every night and restitching up the cape and the tights.
In the 1950s television series, the writers cooked up a brilliant explanation for the indestructibility of Superman's famous suit.
There's a baby in it!
Land sakes alive!
The suit was made by his adoptive Earth parents, the Kents, out of the Kryptonian blanket that accompanied baby Kal-El to Earth.
Here. Burn much?
Not burned at all. Blanket ain't even scorched.
The Kents said, well, let's take these blankets that shotguns can't blast through and dynamite can't blow up and see if we can reweave them into something. Using Clark's heat vision, they would sever the threads, and eventually they became his super suit.
We do have carbon fiber materials that are very dense, relatively flexible, but Superman's costume has been used to cloak innocent people from hazards. I don't have an explanation as to the nature of the material that could do that.